How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, we're going to give out 5 tips when it comes to running a close custody disciplinary housing unit. One of the hardest jobs in prisons and jails is running housing units that deal with the unruly, those that tend to break the rules and just make it a little bit harder for us to have to be effective at our job. My guest today is going to be Joe Pomponio, but before I bring him on, let's go over our sponsors. First sponsor is American Military University. If you guys get a chance, if you're looking to get a degree, seek higher education, maybe bring even some experience into those classrooms, please check out American Military University. They have a great online program, very supportive of what we do in corrections, but also very supportive of what we do here on Tier Talk. So if you guys get a chance, check out AMU. And we also have Inmate Manipulation Decoded. This book is available, used in training all across the country, and this book sells. So first of all, I want to thank you guys for the continued support on this book. This book is available on Amazon and can be found within the link of the description I have below. Let's see. And we also have How to Succeed in Corrections. This book is selling as well. This book can only be bought through the publisher, which is Blue 360 Media. Again, I have a link to this book in the description as well. But guys, this book is really making its mark. It's being used. It's being sold to retailers, which is great. And I'm also working on another book. It's for rookie staff. I'm looking to get 50 passages. Will be 33 by the end of the day. So I have I'll have 16 left. 16 or 17 left. We'll figure it out. But that book is doing, it's got some good thoughts in there. And guys, even though I'm giving it to our rookies, it's meant to complement the other books. I am trying my best not to reiterate the passages that I've written in the past. So just be wary that when you get this book, the book is going to help you, yes, but it's going to complement what's already out there. So it's not meant to be a standalone book. It's meant to work in partnership with the other 2 books we already have out on the market. And I'm telling you something, guys, this is really starting to get to kind of have this completed just knowledge just being put out there that kind of fills the gap. That's the key. And a lot of this stuff that we provide is really more detailed as we discovered or have developed discussions. But we try to lean away from the simple 101 advice that we feel you're going to get through a lot of the training that you may get in the academy. We wanted to basically build these books off of developed dialogue and discussions when you have people with experience just exchanging the how, yes, but the reasons behind it that have been developed through evaluated experiences of doing the job for many, many years. So a lot of the thoughts that are in these books come from, just evolved discussions that we've had on Tier Talk, as well as just chatting as we do our normal day. All right, so let me get Joe. What's up, Joe?
Hey, morning, Anthony. How's it going, brother?
Good, Joe. Always good to see you. Happy Saturday morning.
Happy Saturday.
Hey, Joe, you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Absolutely. My name is Joe Pomponio. I'm a retired lieutenant with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice of 30 years. Currently working for our county, local county sheriff's department in their jail division, and panel member of Tier Talk.
Yes, and we love to have you, Joe. I thought this would be a good topic, Joe. Five tips for working in a close custody disciplinary housing unit. Now, we just pretty much got on today's show before we started, and we basically came up with 5 quick tips. Again, nothing's all inclusive, but I do believe these tips will help. There are some that are very basic, and then there's 3 that are probably a little bit more involved. Definitely just something that has been developed through experience. So let's do one of the basics first. Let's do this one first, Joe. I'll have you start because this was your suggestion. Let's do give them what they need and not what they want. What does that mean, Joe? First off, Joe, before we go into that, Joe, what is a close custody disciplinary housing unit, and what is your experience with them? Let's do that first.
Close custody housing, man. It's a world. It's a city within a city. Closed custody contains most of your offenders who are chronic rule violators. That are pretty much one step away from the maximum custody. Normally, your maximum custody are assaultive towards staff. Your closed custody tend to be more of your chronic rule violators, sexual misconducts, fighting all the time with other offenders, ones that don't want to go to work, whatever the case may be. And, they've just accumulated enough cases where classification is, decided it's time to downgrade them to a closed custody disciplinary housing unit. I've always enjoyed closed custody because to me it was a city within a city, and closed custody to me was more structured than general population. It was one of the fashions that I loved most about closed custody and enjoyed working it.
Yeah, and I want to mention something too. For us, when it comes to dealing with these close custody units, I want people to realize something. When you have inmates that have high restrictions, their mindset's going to be a lot different than inmates that are living a less restrictive lifestyle. So for those inmates that are high restrictive, they're going to be very innovative, and their mindset is how to kind of make time very comfortable for them. And what they try to do is a lot of them tend to be a little bit more manipulative in what they want or how they should be housed. And then you get those again that are in regular population that really they're enjoying life a little bit better than those in high restriction, and their mindset may be just to kind of get through the day, get through the daily routine of things. But they're not looking to do anything technically that would sacrifice those comforts. Again, nothing's 100%, but just let you know the mindset of someone who's kind of doing the right thing is in GP with limited restrictions. Their mindset is basically just making it through the day, where the mindset of those that are in highly restricted areas could be looking for more levels of comfortability to alleviate some of those restrictions. And sometimes their efforts can be very, very innovative. And that's why I think Joe's first lesson right here, give them what they need and not what they want, is a good balance of that. Because yes, you have to give them what they need, which is going to be the bare minimum, but they're going to constantly try to get what they want. Is that what your thought is on that, Joe?
That's absolutely the thought, because of the fact that, most of your closed custody is dependent on the state. Like in Texas, closed custody, they spend a vast majority of their time in cell unless they come out for recreation, for their 1 hour recreation or day room, or they're coming out for their shower. They tend to spend most of their time in cell. And when that happens, they have a lot more time to be innovative as to being manipulative towards the staff, so, for the staff working closed custody, it just because they're secure in the housing unit doesn't, negate the fact that they're not dangerous to the staff or each other for that fact. So, one thing to keep in mind working closed custody is, know your policies and procedures, know your building schedule, and know what the closed custody inmates are authorized to have as far as necessities, as far as properties. Different levels, depending on the state, different levels of closed custody are authorized to have different property, depending on, how long they've gone without a major disciplinary or a minor disciplinary infraction since, being assigned to closed custody. That's why it's always important to know your policies and procedures, to know exactly what they're authorized to have. And, that's exactly what you should give them, only the items that they're authorized to have. Because like I said, they're locked up in their cell a vast majority of their days, sometimes 16 to 20 hours a day, before their day room or out of cell time or any kind of recreation or showers or escorts to and from medical. So they have plenty of time to think and manipulate and to think about what they can do to benefit themselves. So, that's why I always stress it's important to know your policies and procedures, treat them firm, fair, consistent, and exactly give them what they need, what they're authorized to have, but, you never give them what they want.
Yeah, and guys, I want to mention something too, just to complement Joe's thought. When you work in a very highly restrictive environment for an inmate, they could sometimes, depending on what they're allowed to have or not have, they can go through intense boredom. And that means that they're going to kind of look at you for entertainment. They're going to watch what happens in the unit more than the other inmates. Well, don't get me wrong. In GP, you're going to have those inmates too. But again, they could have distractions where in these highly restrictive units, it's not as distractful. So their entertainment is going to come from watching you, watching your routine, watch how you do your job, and then maybe find some entertainment and trying to get over on you, seeing where you're not being as effective as you should be, and just maybe just trying to take advantage of some of those vulnerabilities. I know sometimes people say, well, usually the inmate has an end game and they try to do something. I agree, but sometimes the end game is simply just, I got you. Got you, you idiot. You know, you're an idiot and I got you. And then they get that recognition and status. So sometimes it's not for that highest level of, oh, I want to get contraband, or I'm going to escape, or whatever it is. Sometimes it's just, I got you. You were dumb enough and I got you. You know, I've been watching you all day and I said, hey, I'm going to give this a shot. And I got you. I mean, I remember stories when I was a rookie of an inmate who was a master at somehow getting officers' IDs. And you would think that, well, how stupid could you be? How stupid could you be to give an inmate your ID? But yet this inmate was able to get it multiple times. So then it goes from, is the staff member stupid or is this guy just that good? You know, I'm just curious. So either way, you know, be careful when you work these units, because inmates could look at you as, hey, you know what, this is actually pretty entertaining. He's not doing his job. He's not doing this. He's not doing that. So I'm gonna fuck with him a little bit. I mean, would you agree with that, Joe?
Well, absolutely. They have more time for you than you have for them. That's for sure. You know, I've seen them run bosses to death. You know, especially on the, you know, the cell blocks where they're 3 tiers high. You know, by the time the boss gets down to the first floor, they're hauling for that boss again. And it's not because they need anything; it's because it's entertainment value. They just want that boss to run back up the 3 rows so the comic can go, I didn't need anything. I was just kidding. You know.
You know what? You know what's funny too. So, granted, you know, we have cameras in the unit, and we're always on point. Don't get me wrong. But trust me, there are times where, you know, we kind of want to be a break from, you know, from being watched. And sometimes we may just kind of step aside for a little bit just to get some me time, whatever it is, because it's tough to always have those cameras constantly on. You know, I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong. Just sometimes it's good just to kind of stretch out without, you know, thinking that the cameras are watching you, you know. And sometimes I will tell you right now, because you always have to assume those cameras are watching you. 100% be professional. But even if you think you're in an area where, you know, a camera's not watching you, they are. You know,
Absolutely.
so you have to be prepared to go in knowing that you're going to be a celebrity. Let's just do it that way. Everybody's going to know who you are. They're going to be watching you at all times. So you're just never out of view. You have to look at it that way. You're just never out of view, because if the cameras don't catch you, one of the inmates are seeing you do it. So just you know, just be mindful. You're always being watched. And again, most of the time, you know, yeah, it could be to get over, but there's also some times where it's entertainment. It literally is entertainment for them. Okay, let's do the next one. I want to do another basic tip as well, just to make sure we get these good ones out of the way. Make sure, right here, make sure you're going through all your security measures, no shortcuts. Joe, so when we're working a close custody housing unit, obviously these inmates require more attention, yes, but they also require higher levels of security, so you need more staffing. I mean, these aren't going to be your normal interactions. You know, these are inmates that have known to get over the system a little bit, so you want to be doing your searches, your rounds, your tours, and at any moment when you're not doing it is now there's a gap in that security in which that inmate now has the capability. I mean, you could trust that they always have the ability. You could trust that. They're ready to go when the opportunity arises. But our security, our measures that we do every day to make sure we're running a safe environment is supposed to minimize their capability. Now, with that said, if you're not doing it, you're just basically enhancing their ability to go ahead and challenge the system. And hopefully, sad to say, if we don't stop it, I didn't mean to say hopefully, but sad to say is if we don't stop it, one of us get hurt. You know, if it's not you, it could be your partner or someone else. Joe, what's your thoughts on going through these regular security means?
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, security. You know, they used to hang signs on all the doors that say "security is not convenient." They used to hang them in all the duty posts for the officers to see. And you know, the reason being is even with closed custody, and even more so with closed custody, Just because you have one in a set of handcuffs does not make him any less assaultive to you or your partner or anybody else for that matter. And nor does it, absolve him from being assaulted by another offender who can reach out through the cell block bars and get him. So, it's always good to practice good security measures. Make sure, you're going through your proper protocols, as far as, your strip searches. Make sure he's not, hiding any contraband. Make sure he doesn't have a shank. Make sure he's restrained before you take him out of the cell. I can't tell you how many times I've seen an officer roll the door and then handcuff the offender afterwards. And, it's sad to me because of the fact that the officer's taking a chance of being assaulted or getting his partner assaulted, it's just a good practice to make sure, especially when bringing one out of the cell, that you have two officers present. There's been times where I've seen officers go get one out of the cell because the other officer is feeding, and he's like, well, I don't want to bother Gangi. He's down there on one row handing out trays. This guy's just going to the shower. I got him, and we had an incident where that happened in one of our Beaumont units, and, the inmate wound up slipping a cuff, had a pen in his pocket, and stabbed the officer directly in the eye. So, making sure your proper security measures are taken. It's not because that we're worried about the building schedule. We're not worried about the showers getting completed. We're not worried about, did all recreation get run? We're more worried about your safety as a person, to everybody who's assigned to close custody.
Joe, you're spot on, because sometimes I feel that we believe the pressure of the time to complete something supersedes the security measure, and it doesn't. If you're not able to produce because, you're taking the security measures, document it, and then literally, if someone goes to challenge it, show them, say, hey, listen, we're doing everything we can. But, for example, these inmates that got to go to yard, I got to strip them before they go in. I got to strip them when they come out. And, and there's a process here. As long as you're able to show the process, good management should be able to look at it and say, well, you know what? We're trying. So again, we're trying, and whatever, we don't do today, we'll make up for tomorrow. We'll just kind of just do the best we can. I mean, that's the key, because at the end, if you're doing the best we can, usually the higher level court systems don't really mess with our operations to that point where they're kind of micromanaging what we're doing. If we tell them we have all these security measures in place, and at this point, we're not able to accommodate this type of schedule, so are you telling us right now to drop these security measures to accommodate, there's some liability there, but, most likely the court is like, okay, well, just document your efforts. That's the key. Document your efforts so we can go ahead and showcase to anybody that tries to do a lawsuit. Of course, inmates are going to sue. And I remember, guys, inmates sue on an individualized basis. Your objective when responding back is to show collective. Basically, yeah, I know this guy is suing because of this, but be mindful, he's not the only one that we have to meet their needs. So having said that, maybe we missed him for a day, but we didn't get to this guy for 2 days. So, you got to show your exhausted effort in maintaining safety and security. And the moment you're not meeting certain needs that's expected, all you got to do is document. But I love Joe said that post-security is not convenient. It's not. When you add the need for security and the pressure of time, people will tend to some reason just shift to that priority, that pressure of time. You know what, to be honest with you, that's all superficial. What's not superficial is that security measure. That security measure that now you're cutting short because you're worried that you don't get this yard out in 5 minutes. You're doing it backwards. The priority should never shift because of some external pressure on time. No, I'm sorry. Why did yard run late today? It ran late for this, this, and this. And as a good supervisor who should understand what it's like to be that frontline professional, should just say, okay, gotcha. All right, let's just keep that documented, because I'm not going to go ahead and now, as that frontline supervisor, being the voice for my officers, I'm not going to go to my officers and say, hey, I'm sorry, that's inexcusable. Next time, get it done. No, because now they're going to start feeling that they have to cut corners. If you know your officers and they're doing the job 100% effective, and they come out and say, hey, we're running late today because of A, B, C, D, because here's another thing people don't take into account for. Is each effort requires a brief interaction with the inmate. You got to get that inmate from point A to point B. So sometimes they're like, well, how long does it take to walk an inmate from point A to point B? Maybe a minute, but that's if they're compliant. It takes a minute. There's still effort sometimes in getting them where they got to be. So, yeah, I think that's a great need, but never cut corners. Do your searches, do your tours, do whatever needs to be done to make sure you're running a safe and effective unit. Do your strips, because even if there isn't the pressure of time, don't get complacent. Don't be lazy. Do what's expected of you, because the moment you don't, the inmates realize that there is a gap there, and they're going to pounce when you least expect it. And I'm going to tell you something. You may not have been the one that does the strip. Okay, so maybe you failed to do the strip, but that doesn't mean you're the one that's going to be hurt. Remember that. Just remember that. I failed to do a strip. I can get Joe hurt now. Whatever the case may be. Joe, any closing thought before we move to that next one? That was
you tuned that up perfectly. Never let the building schedule force you into a corner where you're taking shortcuts. The building schedule is just a 24-hour format of what should be happening within your facility in a 24-hour period. That just because it's on the timeline doesn't negate you from doing proper, performing proper security functions. So never let a timeline force you into shortcuts that can get you or somebody else hurt.
One more pro tip on this one. When you work those closed housing units, right? Safety and security. Close those food ports.
Absolutely. Close
those food ports. Yeah, God. Just close them. Guys, you got inmates that are problematic, close them. And if by chance these inmates, they're so problematic that when you go to deliver them something, it requires them to go to the back of the cell. Get them to go to the back of the cell. And if they don't go to the back of the cell, don't give them the food. Document it. Call your supervisor and just say, this is what I had to do. Just be those food ports. They're needed, but they're such a threat. Joe, you mentioned this. I think this is definitely spot on. Proper documentation included out of cell time. I kind of added that back end of it, out of cell time. The reason why I'm adding that is because when you have someone in restrictive units, people still believe solitary, restrictive. It's just they combine it. So anytime there's a punitive effort, obviously always en route to rehabilitate, but let's say there is a punitive effort, a need to hold an inmate accountable, the pressures from the outside they care about, is that inmate being allowed out of their cell, phone, visit, yard, maybe whatever it is. You got to document those out of cell time so you can continue to utilize these tools, because in the end of the day, if you're not documenting it, you can't show proof that the inmates are getting what could be 5 hours, depending, maybe 4 hours within the unit, a little freedom, and then maybe 1 hour outside. Again, always controlled, but document your out of cell time. What would be other good things you would document, Joe, here?
Well, definitely you document your medical visits whenever the nurses come cell side or when they're escorted to medical, especially if they're a problematic inmate in the medical sense. Documenting everything that they come out for is just a good liability practice to cover yourself in case something happens down the line and the inmate's family winds up suing. You got documentation to show, that he got medical assistance, at this time on this date, he was given a shower every day, just proper documentation of any out of cell time, not just, your basic stuff like rec, phone, day room. For me, it was just a good practice to document everything, even if they didn't come out, say if medical came cell side for a specific reason, whether they submitted a sick call or something, I would always document that on their out of cell record as well, just as a CYA measure, because having too much documentation never hurts versus not having enough documentation can get you in the end. Just for health and safety measures, you always want to document your showers, your necessities. Most states require that you provide them with showers, clean clothes, meals, 3 times a day, and that's something else. If they refuse their meal because they just didn't want to eat it, document it. If they didn't get their meal because they failed to follow proper protocol, because they wouldn't go to the back of the cell and kneel down until the food port was closed. Document it. It's the little things like that that wind up saving you a whole bunch of heartache in the end.
Yeah, and I want to mention something too, just to keep things objective. If there's a chance that you do get refusals to medical, or you do get refusals to programming, sometimes the inmates may kind of play that game because maybe their medical appointment's the same time as yard and they want to go to yard instead of medical, or it's the same time as their program, so they want to go to yard again instead of the programming. It's always good to get the service provider to come in and get the inmate to sign that refusal. So later on, if they go to challenge something, you even have the backup of the service provider saying, yeah, and I spoke to them, and either they signed this refusal saying they don't want to go, or I asked them and they didn't want to go. So, I mean, it's always good to kind of have that objective perspective, because in the end, they will try to blame custody for not letting them out. And then you're able to say, what are you talking about? Here's your refusal. Or I got the note from medical. Medical followed up, visited the person. The person didn't want to come out. And I know that's not easy to do due to staffing, but I just need you to think about that, because that gives a little layer of protection for custody. Even if you need to get a supervisor maybe to come in and talk to the inmate and get that higher level objective refusal, I guess. You want to make sure that you're able to defend it, because when it comes to those rights of programming and medical, you got to be very wary that the inmate could play a game, and then later on when shit hits the fan, he could say, well, the officer's not letting me out. And you could always say, well, that's not true. I knew you were going to do that. So this is what we did. And just kind of cross his T's, dots I's. And again, that falls in also the first tip about giving them what they need and not what they want. This is just a way to get ahead of the game when they want to go for a lawsuit and try to challenge something, and you want to elevate. Even though your word should carry more weight, you're a sworn official, doesn't hurt to just elevate it a little bit more with some type of proof about that leans into that refusal. Okay, so these two last tips are more of a developed dialogue. These are definitely experience-based tips. So I'm going to have Joe start with this one. Going to the pen should not be your first option unless it's needed. So, Joe, when you're running these close custody units, you already know that these inmates don't follow the rules. So I think that, unless it's needed, when you're constantly going to the pen thinking that that's going to navigate a good running unit, you may be wrong, correct?
Absolutely, because you got to remember, a lot of these guys that are in close custody are probably already maxed out on every one of their disciplinary sanctions already. Visitation, recreation, phone, TV, whatever property, whatever the case may be. 9 times out of 10, your close custody is maxed out anyway. So, in order to work close custody, you got to have good communication and good verbal skills. A lot of the times, most of these offenders will respect the word of mouth versus the ink of pen. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't times where, you're not going to use a pen. There's times where you absolutely have to use a pen. If he chunks on you, if he's assaultive, sexual misconduct, threats, but a lot of the times, these guys are in their cells. They've been in these cells for a while. And a lot of the times it's by their own choice. You have some inmates that don't bode well in general population. They don't bode well in movement of mass movements and people all around them. A lot of these guys, have been institutionalized for a length of time, and to them, closed custody is just one more comfort control for them. So, a vast majority of these guys are resigned to doing their time. Most of them follow the rules to a certain aspect, to a certain point, and it could be something just as simple as coming by and, guy's got a cover on his light. Hey, look out, take it down. You can't have that up there. It'll start a fire. Get it down. Not everything always needs a pen. That's why anybody working close custody, you got to have good communication, good verbal skills.
Yeah, and what's funny is, so I've seen senior officers keep a very quiet unit by managing it through some level of respect and expectations. And then I've seen some rookies who are going to go in there, and I get it, have to go right to the rules because that's kind of how they learn the job. And it's chaos, because again, it takes a while to gain that finesse. So again, if you're a rookie, I still would expect you to go to the rules at first. You got to learn how to navigate that. I get that, but the way that senior officer moves, you kind of want to watch, but you're not going to be at that point to be that person. Remember that. But you want to try to slowly be introduced to that. But don't hold yourself to this higher level. When it comes to running those close custody units, you're going to see an officer that's got like years of experience being able to maneuver. And then you may look at yourself and, you're trying to do it one way and the inmates are all over the place, but you're still trying to crank order. Don't see yourself as a failure when you're comparing yourself to an officer that's walked that unit for many years. They're using tools that they've developed through experience that may not be so easily passed off. So, granted, they were just like you trying to figure it out, but then they started to discover a finesse, which was slow, but it occurred. And then through time, they manage it. That's what they do. So I want to make sure that if you're a rookie and you're looking at the senior CO, don't give yourself unrealistic expectations of where you think you need to be on day one. And as a senior CO, you should know that and maybe be that balance for that rookie officer where you're going to have to assist them in gaining some type of control at first because they may have to borrow on some of your influence. But either way, it is a process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. But I definitely, when I do my tours as management, I know when I got my senior officers, on point doing their job. And I also know when I have a rookie, and they're going through some challenges. So also the supervisors come on scene more. But I will tell you one thing. And again, you could have someone that just has that dynamic from the get-go, granted. I'm not saying that. There are always people that just know the game and they have that finesse because that was a gift they came in with. But sometimes when I walk into a unit and I got a rookie officer on site and they're the main officer, let's say, and the unit's quiet, I have concerns on so many levels. I mean, that's all I'm going to say. I have concerns on so many levels. Either there's, where there's some advantage being given to the population, maybe, I don't know. But let's just do it that way. I don't want to automatically make assumptions, but I always get very concerned when I got someone on day one and the unit's extremely, extremely quiet because you would expect a little bit of chaos with a rookie. It's same thing as if you're a substitute teacher coming in. Kids are they going to try to circumvent. So when I have absolute quiet with no higher level influence to assist the rookie, I'm going to probably do a couple of tours and just see what we got going on, because to me that's a bit unexpected. Not saying it's possible. It's possible, but let me just check because we're missing something here. Maybe. Would you agree with that, Joe? Or am I wrong? Or
Oh no, I absolutely agree. And that's where when you're putting a rookie officer with somebody, especially in a close custody wing, it's almost prudent to have them with an officer that's going to train them the right way. Because you're absolutely correct. Coming in on day one, you shouldn't have the same expectations of respect as a day one rookie is. That 20-year vet that's walked that same run for 20 years and developed that rapport with the inmates. That. When you on your day one, your whole job is to make it through the end of the day and keep the chaos to a minimum. And for the offenders, it's their job to invoke chaos and just to see how you're going to react. It's a trial and error period for both sides.
Yep. And then now the last tip, I'm actually going to put in my rookie book. It was something I thought about earlier today that kind of was the foundation for this topic. I just didn't know where I wanted to apply it. And I thought that I can add this tip to this discussion because I think this is the tip that is a very good pro tip. And for those that have stayed to the end of this dialogue, this is a good tip. This is something that I think was worth the time. I want people to understand when you work in these close custody units, you got to know the difference between an inmate that poses a threat and an inmate that's simply being annoying. Now, granted, at any point, an annoying inmate can elevate to a threat, but let's just keep it, initially at this level. You have two types of problematic inmates. You have inmates that are a threat, whether to themselves, others, or property in some extent. And then you have inmates that are just annoying and persistent. Now, in my experience, I have dealt with these inmates a bit differently. Now, granted, if I have an annoying inmate that elevates to a threat, then I elevate my emergent need to respond to that inmate. So I'm not telling you to ever ignore them, but just bear with me on this. If I have an inmate that's a threat immediately, granted, we're always prepared to respond. We've gone through training. We know what to do to manage these threats, but the pressure of time has a level of control on us. Because you can't wait. You got to get in there. You got to do what you got to do. You just got to make sure you safely do so. So a threat to me, there's some level of control that we give up in regards to the pressure of time. It's not a patient response. You got to get in there. So that's where we really rely on our training to kind of give us that automatic reaction we need to be effective and eliminate whatever that threat is. So for me, all the energy when it comes to an inmate that poses a threat is on the front end by us. All the energy when an inmate poses a threat is given to us on the front end. And we have to make sure that we do it right the first time. You can't fuck this up. But when it comes to an inmate that's annoying, persistent, maybe someone that's just banging on the cell door, just yelling, whatever it is, this is where patience becomes a virtue. And we want to get them to exhaust all their energy on the front. So when they're tired out, we come in with our energy. And again, for the annoying inmates, the reason why I want to make sure we separate them is because if we treat the annoying inmates at the same level we treat an inmate that's a threat, the annoying inmates become distractions. And the inmates that are actually threats wind up building up their game. I mean, if you have an inmate that's just an annoying inmate and you put him in a unit where all the inmates are threats, that inmate that's annoying is going to tie up all your time, and the inmates that are threats are building weapons. And then I'm like, well, why are your weapons building up? Because you gave me this asshole inmate here who's annoying, and unfortunately, it's tying up our response every time he acts a fool. So granted, knowing the difference kind of knows where you have to put your energy in. But it's not a perfect world. Sometimes an inmate can be both annoying and a threat. It depends on how far are they willing to go to seek attention. And that's something you're going to have to be able to figure that out in the moment. It's a tough choice to make. It's not easy. I'm not giving you something that's simple, black and white. Nothing in corrections is simple decision making. But I do believe if you know the difference, I do believe it could aid you in some level of your decision making. But I think this is a really good pro tip. I don't think it's something that we really discuss often, but I'm going to definitely put it in my new rookie book, just a little bit more quicker or a little brief. But Joe, what's your thoughts on this part?
Yeah, I mean, you said it all wonderfully.
Thank you.
The annoying, no matter where you go or what you do, you're always going to have the annoying, the one that, tries to tie up all your time, whether they're whiny or just, stupid inactions or actions that tie up more of your time than it should. Inmates who try to flood their cell versus inmates who, try to set their cell on fire. Being able to prioritize and have the patience to deal with the annoying so that you can focus on the inmates that are a threat is definitely a virtue. It's something that you'll learn quickly, especially if you're in a rough closed custody where, you got inmates that bang, most of them that I know of, you got inmates that bang all the time, whether they're banging their locker lids, whether they're banging on the doors, versus one that's flooding the run. Obviously you're going to let the one that's banging bang. At some point, he's either going to get tired or he's going to get tired where we can actually deal with him after we're done dealing with our threats. It's where prioritization, having a good, even temper, having a lot of patience will come into play.
Yeah, and I think that's where the chapter here, that's where patience is a virtue because, again, you're in that unit, hearing that banging constantly. Yeah, it could flip you out. It's. But having said that, you got to be careful of how many times you're going to respond to that because every time you respond to that one person that's annoying, you're ignoring the inmates that potentially require some higher level of
And
vigilance.
that's exactly well, all that banging, makes you wonder, well, hell, what am I not hearing? I'm not hearing the two cellmates getting into a fight and one getting stabbed to death over the banging. So, you got to think about what are you not hearing? What are you not seeing because of that?
And that could also, I love that, Joe, because that could also be planned by the inmate. I'll start banging up, or they
Absolutely.
know that this inmate's going to start acting out at this time. And, so yeah, so I think that's a good pro tip. I think it's something that we know, but we never really express it. Because I have seen people, leave their, restrictive housing, like, man, that damn inmate's so freaking annoying. And they're like, why is he even housed in this unit? And it's like, hold on, that's a great discussion, because why is he housed in that unit? Maybe there's a better way to house the annoying. Again, but the only concern you have is when that inmate in their need for attention or their want for attention elevates their actions to the point where they do become a threat. And most of the time, it could be a threat to self-harm, to be honest with you. Some of these guys that look for these attentions, don't get me wrong, they could lash out on someone else to get the attention. But if they're really by themselves, if they realize that this banging of the door is not working and my flooding my cell is not working, it's just not getting the attention I want, they know automatically an effort to self-harm will automatically get them the attention that they need to, maybe get them out of the cell, get them checked by medical, whatever it is that they're looking for. So I would say 9 times out of 10, but nothing's 100%. If you fail to give the annoying inmate some level of attention, it does elevate to maybe some level of self-harm, or it could help harming others, but most of the time it's usually some level of self-harm. So I believe that there is still some balance within that patience that you have to be more long-term with it, so you don't have an inmate just, you know, constantly going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You got to have a very good strategy when it comes to dealing with those annoying inmates. Because believe it or not, even the inmates that are a threat, you could put them in some real good, highly restrictive areas because you can justify how the person was a threat and you had to eliminate a lot of their privileges to maintain some level of safety and security. For those that are annoying, it's hard to sell that. So when you start taking stuff away, people start looking at that as being punitive. So sometimes they may not even want to go to that level that they're a threat because then, it's going to justify your restrictions. So just be very wary of, the different types of responses that are required. But remember, for each one, especially for the one annoying, try to get something that's more long-term and more strategic. And if possible, if they can exhaust their energy on the front end, like Joe said, there's more success for us when dealing with an annoying inmate through patience as opposed to an immediate response. And as for the inmate that's a threat, the success for an inmate that's a threat is really on the front end of that threat and not on the back end, because it gives them too much of an opportunity to carry out. Because again, we talked about this before, you don't want their capabilities to become abilities. And the longer you allow for that, I know some people think that time's on our side. Not when that person immediately poses a threat. No, time is not on our side. It's on our side if we're trying to de-escalate before he has the ability to pose a threat. So I guess, de-escalation is great when there's a capability, but the ability isn't present. But when the ability is present, time is not on your side. It's not on your side. Don't confuse that for a minute, because I know people are like, well, hey, the longer it's delayed, the more it helps us. No, not when the person has the ability. When the person has the ability, the time switches to us now. It's we have to respond. Joe, any closing thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, just make sure you're prioritizing yourself correctly when you're on these pods as far as closed custody. Especially with the annoying versus the
Threat.
threat. Thank you, senior moment.
Yeah, it happens, Joe.
You gotta think. Like I was saying, as far as the banging and stuff's concerned, it's not so much why is this inmate banging. It's what the hell is he trying to cover up? Is he trying to cover up somebody who's chipping away at a cell wall to try to plan an escape? Is he chipping, is he banging on the door because his cellie next door is trying to stab his cellie to death? You would always want to walk your runs, and after you see that everything's clear and everybody's secure and safe, then you go back and you deal with the banging inmate and find out why he's banging. 9 times out of 10, it's pure bullshit. He didn't get what he wants. He didn't get a second tray. He didn't get a bigger portion of a meal or whatever. At that point, I'd just tell him, hey, bang away, carry on. At some point he's going to get tired, but don't. The main thing is you run them, don't let them run you.
Yeah, just one more thing I want to add on to Joe's thought. Obviously, when you check, you also got to be a little concerned on how they're banging, but most of the time it's just pushing against the door, which we could probably address in a little bit. But if they're literally taking their knuckles and smacking the door or busting the wall, you gotta get medical on there, because
Yeah.
you got to get ready to prepare for your response to get in and get that by, because now that's more than just being persistent. There's injurious behavior that's going to have to be addressed. So I just want to make sure we balance that out. But Joe's 100% correct. You got a guy that's just making a lot of noise, screaming, whatever it is. That's a lot different than someone just like trying to get your attention and starts cold punching the wall or banging their head. You got to get your team ready, and you got to get them sent over. Hey Joe, closing thoughts. But this was good dialogue, man. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too. I mean, I've always loved closed custody. Like I said, to me, it was always a city within a city, and it's one of those things where if you can earn respect, learn verbal communication skills within a closed custody environment, there is not a portion of that facility that you cannot run on your own. Be more aware of your surroundings while in a closed custody environment, because, like I said, these guys have plenty of time in cell to think about what ways they want to manipulate you or use you for their entertainment. And in some cases, depending on the penitentiary, how they can harm you. I've seen them make crossbows out of underwear elastic, with rolled up newspaper and rolled up magazines for spears. That's why it's so important to make sure that you're following all your proper security measures. Make sure your bean chutes are closed. That's probably the biggest violation I've ever seen, is on any closed custody, is not ensuring that your bean chutes are secured and locked. Make sure you're taking the time to follow proper security protocols, not just for yourself, but who's working with you. And most of all, be safe doing it. Document all your activities, and it's just not, it's not that you're documenting because you have to. It's because you should want to. Just as a security, as it's additional security measure, not just for you. It could be for your relieving officer who's coming on. They can go back and look at his cell card and go, okay, well, this happened and he refused this and he refused that, or he was a behavioral problem. It's not just documentation just to keep the agency in check. It's documentation for knowledge for you and your staff.
Yeah, and guys, the reason why it's good to have these discussions, I think even as we develop our dialogue, is you understand what level you're at in the game, and what should be expected of you. So I even think when we talked about how a senior officer moves versus a rookie officer, again, if you're a rookie officer and you're trying to hold yourself to that unrealistic high standard at day one, this dialogue tells you you're not going to be at that level. So it puts you from having like this outcome to where it's the journey. So part of the dialogue that we had today was really just also understanding the journey of what it takes to really be effective in these units. I mean, this really are units that are, it's really experienced officers that just know how to maneuver, that build to that level of expectation. And believe it or not, the experienced officer, besides knowing the game a little bit, has some level of professional familiarity with these inmates. So they know them. And the inmates slowly through time start to build a level of expectation for that officer. And usually, like Joe said, the very first tip was needs versus wants. The inmates are going to need you way more than you'll ever need them. So they're going to know that, there are certain officers that are going to give them what they need, not what they want, but are going to give them what they need. And they're not going to want to mess with those guys either sometimes, because they know that, when everyone else is messing with them, Joe's going to come in and do the right thing, and give them the blanket when it's cold or whatever it is. So it's a very unique dynamic, because they may treat us like crap sometimes, but we're also their provider. And the inmates kind of have to also maneuver through that balance. And I think it really does equal out when you have an officer with experience that just manages that unit through respect, and then the inmates just get accustomed to that level of authority. And I want to add one more thing that could have discussed earlier, but a thought just came to my mind. Corrections has changed. We know that. So these units are last resorts. These units are after an exhaustive measure has been done to try to accommodate the needs of that inmate in GP. But unfortunately, now the inmate has become a hassle. And now, in order to be effective with the GP, this inmate has to be put somewhere aside and handled a little bit more individualized. Because again, those units RHU cost more because they have more individualized efforts based on the needs of the individuals. Now, granted, because times have changed, our ability to advertise our authority, and I literally mean advertise our authority. When right now the world is changing where inmates feel very entitled. It is what it is. There's people on the outside just basically just allowing negative behavior to occur because we as custody are just very concerned about holding inmates accountable and being punitive, and we always have to justify it. So it kind of limits our actions. But if someone from the public is watching this, I want you to know something. Sometimes our efforts to use force, our efforts to take away items are just a way to establish our authority. And when I mean use force, usually use force is reactionary. It's not, we didn't come in wanting to use it, but the inmate did something to where now we have to use force to make sure we can safely house that inmate. That's the key. And the same thing with taking away items. The inmates acting unruly. This is the main thing that we do to gain compliance is to take away items. Even cell extractions, which you don't want to do every day because it minimizes on the value behind a cell extraction. Because I want people to know when we step up and act on these extremes, whether it's taking away item or having to use force to restrain an inmate or having to do a cell extraction, it's really in a way to promote some level of authority and also remind the inmate that you're still in our house, that we still have control. And that's a good thing, guys, because they need to hear that. That's why they're in a prison setting, because they couldn't be controlled on the outside. It's not meant to be an aggressive measure, but it's gotten to that point where we have to literally showcase the authority because it's not being seen in the shadows. It's for this inmate, the authority's got to be showcased. With that said, this is just a final thought here. Sometimes it's gotten to the point where the inmates are so entitled that they've gotten used to us showcasing that level of authority. And now, instead of us using that level of authority to gain some level of control and, again, promote that level of authority, now it's just being used to create balance. I got to do a cell extraction just to regain control when it was just more about reminding people that we're in control. I got to try to take away these items now because, again, I got to regain control of this unit, as opposed to I'm going to take that item today because I'm going to remind him that I'm running this house. It's a different dynamic right now. The dynamic used to be, I run this house. These are the things I'm able to do. Don't make me do them, but at any moment I can do it. And then if I saw that the house was running amok, then you may go back and say, you know what we need? We may need a cell extraction today. Not a negative thing, just the moment an inmate refuses, let's get the cell extraction. Let's remind people that, hey, this is within our authority. Again, a professional cell extraction. We're not hurting anybody, but just to remind people that, hey, you don't have the right to say no on this move. This is a security concern. So granted, I'm going to ask you once, do you want to be moved? No, not a problem. We're going to go ahead and now we're going to go do the cell extraction because I'm going to remind you that I may be asking you as a courtesy, but you're not in a position to say no. And that used to be able to give us that a level of authority just to remind people once in a while that we run it. And mind you, when I say we run it, we're the ones that run it to make sure the facility's safe and secured. Now, sad thing is, these have become tools just to manage the day. They don't carry that level of authority that it used to. So instead of us using it to promote the fact that just a reminder that, hey, we're running the house, so be careful. These are the things that we can do. So be very careful when you go against what we're trying to get you to do. Now it's more of, man, I got no control. And now it's becoming a tool just to balance things out. And that's a shift that has happened because we have changes that have happened nationally that have entitled the inmate to where we can't do those things without going through so much scrutiny. So hopefully for people that are watching this on the outside, know that the efforts that are behind these levels of force, cell extraction, even taking away an item are just reminders of some higher level of authority that we have to maintain safety and security and just trust in our manner to carry it out professionally. I'm sorry, I kind of surprised you with that thought, Joe. What's your thoughts on that? And then we will come to a complete close.
No, I mean, you're absolutely correct. Times have changed to the point where, outside entities and organizations have enabled the offender population to be so entitled that, we had to shift our way of thinking and, shift the way we do things, versus, just like you said, this is my house. This is what I can do, don't make me do it. And, and it's now, this is my house, please don't make me do it. You know what I mean?
Once I get the approval.
Once I get the approval. And, even if we do, like we're under so much scrutiny from, not just not within our own policies and procedures, by outside, media sources, by outside government agencies and coalitions. And, so, yeah, it's definitely changed the dynamic on how we proceed with our job functions.
How we police. All right, guys. So don't want to hold you any longer, but I hope you enjoy your Saturday. As always, guys, love you guys. Please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.